Welcome to the Geniuses of Copywriting Podcast, a peek into the minds and strategies of the world's greatest copywriters, marketers, and persuasion experts. And now, here's your host, Brian Casangina.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Geniuses of Copywriting Podcast. Today's a real special day because I've got somebody who I've looked up to for many years, and many of you listening to this podcast have probably studied him and his work and everything as well. He's somebody who's a household name in the copywriting industry. So I'm really proud and grateful to have John Carlton on the call today. So John, thanks for coming on the call, man.
Oh, I thought you were talking about somebody else when you said it's a household name.
Yeah. So
glad to be here, Brian.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So most of the people listening to this will know who you are, maybe not as in depth as what I do, but for those who aren't familiar, for those who are stupid enough to not be familiar, can you tell us a bit about how you got started? Because I know you've got a really fascinating story.
Yeah, I'll give you the short version. I was 33 when I realized that the slacker lifestyle I was living wasn't going to cut it. I'd lost my girlfriend, my place to live. I was living out of my car, and lost my job. It was, and things weren't, what I was doing up to that point wasn't working. So I sat down and I thought, well, you know what? Nobody's going to save me. I'm going to have to save myself. So I got busy reading, and it took a while to get around because nobody recommended anything to me. And I got around to Think and Grow Rich and discovered what goal setting was. It just astonished me as a slacker most of my life at that point, that you could actually want something, make a plan to get it, and then put that plan into action. That just blew my mind. I know people now kind of take it for granted, but folks, it ain't part of the natural brain chemistry that we have. This idea of looking forward, making a plan, and then putting that plan into action. That's a life-changing thing. So once I got busy, I really poured myself into the idea of becoming a freelance copywriter. I'd never met one before. There were no books written by any freelancers. There were very few freelancers on the scene at this point. This is the early 1980s.
Yeah.
And I happened to be living in a good part of the country. I was down in Los Angeles. I was actually living on the beach in Hermosa Beach. Had a little 1920s wooden ramshackle house over a garage, a studio really, but it had a full view of the ocean and the beach, and it was a great place to write. And one of the reasons that was so good was there were a lot of agencies at the time who were getting involved in direct response. And I wanted to be in direct response because when I started looking at advertising in a way to get good at it, I realized that direct response was the way to go. And that most agencies and most advertising out there was anything but direct response. Yeah. Direct response, we ask for action. We try to make the sale. We complete the deal as much as we can. Whatever the next action is you want the prospect to take, you get them to that point with your writing. Most advertising out there is like they do slogans, or they try to be cute or funny, and they're all based on the strangest ideas of what advertising should be. Most people don't understand it. So at the time I was down in LA, they're all gone now, but when I was there were a couple of agencies who were doing direct response. One of them was Ogilvy and Mather doing a LA office, and a few others. And so I just started going around, and I had one book to my name that had anything to do with copy, and that was John Capel's Tested Advertising Methods. And I had stole that from the first copywriter, the first pro copywriter I'd ever met at one of my last jobs that I got fired at. And I stole her copy and read enough of it to realize I could probably become a freelancer myself before she stole it back. She was convinced I would fail, so she didn't want to help me. So I had that one book. I bought my own copy, and that one book led me to a lot of other books at the library. So I read voraciously for a very short burst of time, so that by the time I had my first interview at an LA agency, I knew more about direct response than they did, even though they were a direct response agency. I learned that most agencies don't have an ongoing education system there. They kind of learn a few tricks and then they get going, and then they think they're madmen all of a sudden. So anyway, I was down there. I was working for the agencies. I got a reputation. Jay Abraham was down there. I met Jay Abraham. because I was keeping an eye on things. I heard about him. I went down and I met him, and I wound up working for free for him in exchange for free run of his office, which I could go to all the parties and everything. And I met Gary Halbert there. And through Gary Halbert, I had a wonderful career for a long time working with him. We started putting on a lot of the events. We kind of invented the HotSeat model and the marketing seminar as it's presented today. We didn't do it on purpose. It was just kind of a natural thing. If we hadn't done, somebody else would have, but we were putting on the first ones. And we did that for a long time through Gary. I met Dan Kennedy, hung out with him a bit. And then through a lot of other people. And then in the 90s, I settled back and got back into writing rather than trying to do deals. Became strictly a writer, wrote all of the ads that I'm now notorious for, all the golf ads and self-defense ads and all those things, which a lot of people are still using in their RIP files. Yeah. And then in 2001, I decided that, being a happy anonymous writer was too much fun and I needed to work a little harder. So I became a guru and started speaking at events, wrote my first book, Kick-Ass Copywriting Secrets of a Marketing Rebel, and took on a business partner, Stan Dahl. And that's been about going on almost 20 years now. So, wow. So that's my story.
Yeah, and I met Stan at the event that we just spoke at together as well. And he's an awesome guy as well.
Yeah.
So that was really fascinating. And I know a lot of that story, having studied you for many years, but some people coming along, may have been studying people like I don't know who the modern copywriters are, because I'm sort of a geek for the old school. And I mean, you're not that much old school, but you're sort of in the originating part of that, where
when I first met Jay Abraham and Gary Halbert, what we had in common was a love for all the guys who had written about advertising who were now dead.
Yeah.
So it's like John Caples, but also Claude Hopkins, especially Claude Hopkins.
Yeah.
And at that point, as I recall, Claude Hopkins was out of print. He was back in print. He's in print now, but he wrote his stuff back in the 1920s. And there were a lot of guys from the turn of the century, and it was just gold. And that was like a secret handshake. It was like you'd meet a writer and said, hey, so tell me who you've been reading. If you mention Claude Hopkins, bang, you're part of the secret.
Yeah, sure. And I was a big fan of guys like Mel Martin as well. I mean, I'm not sure if he's still alive or not, but his work with Fascinations with the Bullets was really eye-opening for me as well.
Right.
So you kind of went down that path of freelance copy, without having that as sharply defined for you as it is now. You can get a million books and courses and seminars on the whole thing and everything. So, but one thing that I think is a key to that, and you put this brilliantly when you did your presentation at the Drayton event in Poland that we spoke at. And I remember that you said this again at the table when we were sitting together with Bond and Caleb and having and this was one of the most amazing but simple things that I've heard you say. It goes, be where you said you'd be, having done what you said you'd do at the time you said you'd do it. Is that how that goes?
It's be where you said you'd be,
yeah,
when you said you'd be there,
yeah,
having done what you said you'd do.
Yeah.
So I call that the professional's code. I made it up, but I discern this from being around professionals and trying really hard to understand what was the difference between a true pro, a wannabe pro, and a goddamn civilian or a rookie. And a lot of it had to do with, and it's not just being prompt. It's understanding the idea that deadlines matter. A lot of, when you take on a client, he's counting on you to come through. Yeah. This isn't something you should just do when you get in the mood. Pros don't wait for inspiration. They don't wait for convenient times. They write what needs to be written, when it needs to be written. I cut my teeth in those first years. I had no backup money. I had about 1 month's rent left.
Yeah.
my name. And I had no plan B when I started out. That was the big thing. I'd only met one copywriter in my life, never met a freelancer. I just knew they existed, and I had to make everything up. But so I figured I better, I had this gun to the head philosophy, and it's like with a gun to my head that would go off if I didn't make this ad work. Would I go out drinking before I sat down and wrote it? Would I miss the deadline? A lot of the stuff is obvious, but I would, I often stayed up all night. It's the big thing for me, Brian, was even more simple than that. It was business before pleasure. As a slacker, it was party before business. It was I was partying several days a week, and it was just that I lived for the weekend and all of that. Then I decided to get serious about things, and if I had an ad to do, I didn't go out on Friday night or Saturday. And, I would stay back and I would think, do I want to go out with the guys drinking, or do I want to read another business book? This one's sitting here. And I realized that I would rather sit with the business book for a while. I didn't kill my social life entirely, but I did dedicate myself to making this stuff work. And also a tip about reading books. I've met a lot of people through the years who are book learned, especially about advertising, but there's no experience behind it. So one of the things that I did that helped was every time I read a book, I knew I'd get 1 to 3 good ideas out of it, but probably only one. And before I could pick up another book or do anything, I had to put that principle into operation. So being a freelancer, you've constantly got jobs, you're looking for jobs, you're constantly testing your sales chops. So I would use what I'd read, and I was, and pay close attention. Did that work? Did it, was it a good idea that didn't work? Is it something I want in my bag of tricks? And pretty soon my metaphorical bag of tricks became really big, thick, deep, and heavy. And that's where the real value of reading a lot is. Not that you know about stuff and you can quote Claude Hopkins, but that what is of value from that, and you've put it to use in actual advertising and marketing.
Yeah, that's a really amazing distinction, because so many people I find what we call Facebook experts. They can write a really good post on Facebook and sound all expertisey, but when it comes to putting stuff in action, they're book educated, like you said. That they know a lot of stuff, but they've never actually used most of it.
Yeah. So being a professional was very, very important to me. You had asked me, Brian, earlier before the call, if I'd come across anything that really made, a big difference to writers. And I've been saying this because I want posterity to know this. I invented the term A-list copywriters. I didn't do it on purpose. I was writing a newsletter, and I wanted to separate the guys on the top of the game from the broad middle group of copywriters and from the rookies. So I just said they're A-list. It's like Hollywood's A-list. Jack Nicholson and Cher and stuff like that. So the A-list. However, I started thinking about it because people ask me, how do you get on the A-list? And back when I was thinking about the A-list, there were only about 15, and they were all guys. Now there are women, but there's only about 15 of them. And these are writers that you can go to, drop a project in their lap, and they will get it done and write a control at an astonishingly high percentage. I mean, close to 100%. Yeah. And if they have, and they will keep after it to make it the control for a very long time. But the other thing is, they don't come just as writers. Most of the A-listers are also valuable consultants. They will tell you if your offer sucks. They will ask you, have you tested, different price points? Yeah. Have you done this? Do you have a back end? They just come with natural set of marketing tools that they'll put a client through the grinder to make sure that all things are there, because the writer's making a percentage of the action and he wants that to be the most. But the reason I brought up there were only 15 back then in the late 80s, these were guys who were writing controls for the largest direct mailers in the business. And now we're back online. But there are still, I ask around a lot, there are still only about under 24 A-list writers in the world. Guys with the chops to be able to, for a business to essentially put the survival of the business into their hands. and let it go. So it's something to aspire to, but you don't get there. You don't go rookie to A-list. You go rookie to journeyman to, veteran writer, and you got to spend some time. And after you had asked me about, what it takes to be in the A-list, I came up with a little formula, and it's empathy plus craft plus experience equals A-list. And those seem simple, but learning empathy can be a huge jump for a writer. It's the one thing missing from most writers who can't consistently write winning copy. And in fact, I was just going back and forth about this with another couple of writers on an ad that we saw out there that just lacked empathy in a market that required a lot of empathy. And it's not standard equipment in a lot of people's heads. It's usually a very limp muscle in anyone's heads. A lot of people never bring it out. I'd say maybe 20% of the population naturally experiences empathy. And of the professional writers I've met through my career, the good ones, 100% of them have either have an easy acquaintance with empathy or have worked really hard to become empathetic. And for anyone who doesn't understand the difference between sympathy and empathy, you need to get a dictionary and look it up. But then the formula is plus craft. And that's the big thing. That's where you do want to read a lot. You want to work under mentors. You want to learn how the good stuff is written. So that's where the skill level of being an actual writer comes in. That's the craft, and knowing what goes into a good piece, knowing when to start pitching, knowing what it takes to close a sale. So understanding salesmanship, marketing, storytelling, all of that's craft, and that can take. At 6 months, you can get okay. But for me, it took several years before I got really good at it. And a lot of writers have been at this game for a decade or more and still are working on their craft. And then the last element of the equation is plus experience. And that's what drives a lot of young writers nuts, is that they don't want to wait. They don't want to, they want this to all happen now. And you just can't do it. You got to get your nose bloodied. You got to go out there and try things, and you can't say, I heard this from Dan Kennedy, and so it's a definite thing that will work. Well, that's one way to have a trick in your bag. A better way is to say, I learned this from Dan Kennedy. I tried it on 3 different pieces and it works. So I've road tested it myself. Yeah. And if you're not road testing stuff all the time, then you're never going to make the A-list. So, it seems like a simple empathy plus craft plus experience, but each one is quite deep. And without any of those, there's no way you're going to make the A-list down the road. With all of those, and with a network involved, in other words, other people you can talk to, other writers, you keep challenging yourself, you work against other writers. You challenge other writers, you go up against existing controls, things like that. That's all part of the experience thing. So there's a lot to be done, but once you get into it and you start rolling, then it can be really fun.
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, and the empathy part, going back to the formula, which is simple but profound. Say the empathy part of that formula is the most important part.
I knew you were going to ask me that, and I was trying to think, and I don't think so. I think they're all 3 equally important. Each one earned its place in the formula. So without experience, the whole thing falls apart. Without craft, the whole thing falls apart. Without empathy, the whole thing falls apart. It's kind of like infantry, cavalry, and artillery. Yeah. Which is more important? Well, it depends on, they're kind of all important,
Yeah. A better question would be which one is, contributes most to the success of a campaign. Because to ask which one is the most important is to, assume that it could support itself, whereas you need all 3, What I'm wondering is, if empathy gives a lot of weight to your success in here, how do you sort of work on a soft skill like that? How do you know if what you think is you being empathetic is actually not that much, and And so you would need to work on it. How does a person go out and improve that as a skill?
See, the formula takes care of that. Experience. You can't intellectually understand empathy. I have another saying that I've been throwing around for about 30 years now, and that's salesmen lead better lives. And that doesn't mean, a lot of people misinterpret that. It doesn't mean that salesmen are better people naturally, or that they somehow are superior to others. What it means is that the way life is, and marketing and life are completely intertwined.
Yeah.
It's complex, it's confusing, it's wonderful and horrifying all at the same time. Joy goes hand in hand with grief. There's, pathos, tragedy, comedy, drama. It's all going on all the time. And knowing this as a writer is essential. So you've got to, let me rephrase that. As a salesman, when you understand people well enough, and this is craft, when you understand people's motivations, where they're coming from, that would be like the demographics. So, you're the list you're writing to, or the targeted audience you're going after in a certain ad is married men, 35 to 45, making under 100K a year, who need blank. Once you know that, and you start to get empathetic about that, and you start understanding and looking for the behaviors or the things that they will challenge, so that you can make your pitch and you will understand where they will say, that's bullshit, or they'll say, maybe, or they'll start to argue with you, or they'll think, I've heard that before. And you've got to know that. You can't just get a cartoon cutout of a prospect and kind of figure, it's male, I get it, I know, and you write to them. There's a lot of things going on. You're talking about another individual as deep or deeper than you are in your, in your life. So salesmen understand this. Salesmen understand how life operates, and they understand that people, to understand people, you have to look at what they do, not what they say they'll do. And this changes everything. So once you realize that you're in a world full of people who will tell you they'll do one thing and never do it, people who will say they're honest and then be dishonest in the next minute, people who are walking around in a zombie daze and really have no goals and no idea what they're doing. They're just bobbing on the surface of the ocean like flotsam and jetsam. And once you understand all of this stuff, then you don't hate people. You actually love them a little more because you understand where they're coming from. And then you want, if you're selling an ethical, good product that can make their lives better, you're kind of like a white knight. And this is a great feeling to have, that you're actually going to help people. Dan Kennedy is now, in a situation where people are writing him letters saying how much he meant to them. Now, he had a sense of this, of course, but he never really knew. And now that he's got compromised health, and people are now writing profound letters, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of letters are coming in, and he's astonished. He never realized that his influence went quite that deep. So it's I don't know. Salesmen lead better lives because they understand life and they get into life. They roll up their sleeves and they understand things. So they aren't sucker punched by life. They may have a horrible life. They may get divorced. They may do stupid things that cause health complications. All kinds of things will happen to them, but they're almost never surprised by it. So there's a sense that they understand and have a grasp of life. I think that's the most important thing. The most important part of craft for a writer is salesmanship. And that's why when I started out, I started getting information from the guys who were still or had experience selling door to door. Both Halbert and Abraham had done that. Guys who knew what it was like to look another person in the eyes and close a deal. And, a lot of people now, especially online, they've never met their clients or their customers before. And they have only a vague idea of what's going on. So when things go wrong, when pieces don't work, when controls fail, they are in a situation where they need help. And, a good A-list writer already knows it. You experience life as you're writing, so that going out drinking with the boys or going on a tour going to a museum or just traveling a bit is no longer just having fun. You're actually soaking up more stuff that you can use later in your copy. Every person you meet, every situation you're in, every disaster, every adventure, every exciting and boring thing that happens to you puts you more and more in touch with people. And also you're always watching people. How are they acting? How are they behaving? How do they act when they behave when they're feeling good? How do they act? How do they behave when they're feeling bad, when they're feeling pressured, when they're under stress, when things are not going well? How do they act? What do they need to do? So that's why I say that about salesmanship.
Yeah, I agree. And I had a sense of this myself many years ago. I've been doing this about 15 years. And around about 2005, I bought a retail business. And I got out of an engineering job, and I bought a retail business, and I was doing the marketing. And I had been studying direct response for a few years at this time, but I suddenly realized that I didn't know how to sell. I'd never had a sales job. I'd never, I'd studied, I was book learned a little bit by that time, and even writing some copy here and there, but I didn't have those sales chops. So what I did was I went out and I went for 2 years. I went and did different sales jobs. I did door to door. I did the over the phone selling. I did all the stuff like that. I even sold karate memberships door to door, and I sold charity programs and all that sort of stuff, because I knew that I needed to get my head around exactly the stuff that you've just been talking about.
Yeah, that's good advice for anyone who is questioning their ability to sell or their experience with life or anything. Just get a sales job and do everything critically. When you read a book, read it critically. When you read a good phrase or you come across a good idea, stop and acknowledge it. If you're reading something that's nonsense, then, challenge it. Say, that's not true, is it? And when you're out there selling, really think about what happens. I have been in rooms full of really good salesmen, and I've asked them, at what point did you see a no go to a yes? Do you have any stories about this? And most of the good ones do have stories about that. They also have stories where yeses went to no's, during the pitch. And, it's like they didn't just say, wow, so this guy, I don't know what was going on. The guy was crazy. And he said yes. And then he said no. They thought they have a little story. Oh, yeah, it happened when I wouldn't shut up after I said the whole pitch. There's an old salesman thing. Say the pitch, then shut up.
Yeah.
Don't keep pushing after you've made the sale. So this is where all those sayings come from. Reading the old books is great because I like the cliches, and I wrote a lot of them down, and I would hang them up on the wall. My wall used to be covered with Post-it notes of every little thing I'd heard. And the little anecdotes and the cliches were the best because they were true. They came from something. People roll their eyes at them, but it worked pretty well for me.
So I won't keep you much longer, John. What you've dropped so far is probably one of the most amazing calls that we've had so far on the show. So is there anything else you'd like to share about how a person might, one day consider being an A-list copywriter? What kind of things they need to do along their journey, besides everything you've already covered?
Yeah, it's also a cliche, Brian, but you got to keep challenging yourself, and you got to, I have taught a number of writers through the years how to write. I've put a lot of writers in very, very prestigious jobs by, teaching them the inside secrets, as those secrets were taught to me by guys like Albert and Abraham, like that.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? Oh, it was so profound, Brian. You won't believe it.
Yes.
Oh, it was. Yeah, it was the thing about trying to shortcut things. Writers need to have a little bit of masochism involved too. You've got to. I know what I meant. There were a number of writers who got really good, and I told them, "You're good. You can be a professional writer now." But they wanted to go to the A-list, so they went and started pitching themselves to the biggest mailers or the largest clients out there. And I reeled them back in. I said, no, you're not ready for that. start, do the ladder. Don't try to skip things. And I saved a number of guys' careers who would have failed at the highest end. The top businesses out there that use A-list writers, a lot of them will nurture writers along, but they got to see something in you to nurture. If you start bullshitting and thinking and selling yourself a little too fast, and you wind up in a job that you really can't handle, that's not good. Much better is to wind it back a bit and keep doing jobs that maybe stretch your talents or your experience a bit, but don't do it unknowingly. Do it so that you have an idea what's going on. Find some, in your network of writers, make sure you talk to them about what's going on. If they have experience in that market, arm yourself and do it. Don't oversell yourself. Remember, you're dealing with clients who are depending on you. Without copy, they are nothing. And that's across the board, every market, every niche, every business there is. And most marketers don't know how to write. So you are the linchpin to their wealth, happiness, and survival. So don't be coy about this. Don't try to sell yourself as better than you are, but don't undersell yourself either. So knowing that, I wouldn't walk into a automobile dealership and say, I can sell cars, because I've never sold cars. I've sold other things, and I could figure it out. And I certainly have a number of people I could go to learn some things, but I wouldn't present myself as a slam dunk in that. However, there are 30 or 40 other niches and markets that I can very confidently say, I know exactly what to do. And if you have a good product and we have a good offer, I will write the copy, and if you have a list you can reach, or you know how to bring in the right kind of prospect, we'll make this a success. And I will more or less bet the farm on it. But that's from experience. That's not from cocksuredness. So
yeah, it's very sage advice for people who sort of want to jump up the ladder and skip all the hurdles, and they read a book today and they want to be a high paid guru tomorrow. Which is what, slow and steady isn't a very good sales pitch for the business opportunity industry. No one's going to buy that book. So, but it's because no one wants to do what's required to actually succeed, which is actually do the work.
Yeah, and as you know, I've had to couch my advice, which is basically grow up and get serious about what you're doing. I've had to couch that in other terms throughout my career, and talk about how easy and fast all this stuff can happen. When I've been talking to writers, I don't want to get them. I don't want to get them discouraged right off the bat, and I will lead them gently into the easier parts. But, at the end of the day, the lessons come down. Yes, it's easy, when you know the secrets, but the experience thing still matters, and honing your craft will still take time. So, even taking it slow and steady, you can still take 50 clients a year. You can work your ass off and get experience from each one of those clients and do it, and just not try to shortcut everything. Just do what you need to do to get the job done, meet your deadline, and make it a piece that does what it's supposed to do. It sells if it's supposed to sell. That lead generates if it's supposed to lead generate. That continues the conversation or back ends, whatever it's supposed to do. Even content, by the way, content falls under all of this too. So.
Yeah. If you remember what, I don't know if you were in the room at the event when Drayton said, what is content? It's all content. It's the content selling as well. So
that's right. Yeah, I do recall him saying that.
Yeah. So it's, I agree with you totally there. But what people really need to do is start to get into some of the stuff that you've been teaching now. John, I've been studying your stuff over the years. I've had different courses in your books, and I've studied under guys like Pete Godfrey back home in Australia, who's a big fan of yours, and a bunch of your courses, and one of the best ones that I went through is a simple writing system. So this is one that you're still running now.
Yes.
I wonder if you could just mention that briefly. I've got a website for everyone as well.
Yeah, basically it's, and I've put over 1,000 entrepreneurs and even veteran writers and a lot of rookie writers. And we've taken rookie writers, put them through the course and set them up with places like Agora Financial. Agora is crawling with writers who have gone through the simple writing system. So what it is, basically, it's a 18-step tutorial. It's video tutorials. Each tutorial is short, but we give people a couple of weeks to get through it, though I used to teach it in 2 days to a room full of people. So you can get through it. And I've known people who've gone through it in a weekend, but we do give people several weeks. And there's two options. You can do it at home, or you can do it in an online class with a professional writer vetted by me, who will be your coach. So you'll watch a video. I'll explain one of the 18 parts, and it's a step-by-step process on how I actually wrote all of the controls that I wrote. I didn't know this process existed till Stan says, you're going through a process. And so I started paying attention to it and started naming it, and realized, first I thought it was 12 steps, and I realized it was 18. And then I fleshed it all out. So I give a talk, very short talk on video, and then we have an exercise to make sure you get it, and the coach will look it over, and it's got all the standard stuff, bullets and headlines and the close, but also research and understanding your prospect as well as possible. All of that stuff is in there in order. So so a lot of writers actually go back to this, and when they need to write a piece, they will just go through each step in order and write down what they need to do and put the whole thing together, and they got a killer pitch that closes sales. So the simple writing system has been around for over 10 years. I actually don't know. I think it might be 12 years now. Got a really good writer right now doing the coaching. He's a guy I've worked with for years, over a decade. Well-known professional, and it's easy to get in. And like I said, there's also an at-home version if you don't want to do the online classroom thing. But it's a lot of fun, and we take entrepreneurs who either need to know how to write or need to know what good writing looks like. So when they hire a freelancer or bring a writer on, they will be able to recognize good stuff. They won't be bamboozled. And a lot of experienced writers and rookies, guys who just want to take it to the next step. So yeah, I recommend the simple writing system to anybody in marketing. It's got a lot of marketing, a lot of intuition. There's good storytelling, and it's everything you ever dreamed of in a short course to get your chops together as quickly as possible and move up a couple of levels.
Yeah, and like, to be honest, you're probably understating the value of it, because it's one of the best training courses out there. This is why I wanted to mention this at the end of this call. Now, the link you gave me is a bit long and curly, so I've shortened that up, and people can go to funnelinfluence.com/SWS, which is short for Simple Writing System. Now, that's not an affiliate link. I don't need a commission out of this. I just want people who are on this call to go and check that course out and get the best education, which is the same that I had. It must be more than 10 years ago that I went through the program.
Do you remember who your coach was?
No, so it's so long ago. I don't even know, but it was...
the way you Aussies party, it's no...
That's probably too many beers.
Wonder that, 10 years ago, was I alive? I forget.
Yeah, I don't drink anywhere near as much as I used to, but that was back in the day for sure. So I feel very strongly about this. Everyone should definitely go and take that course, funnelinfluence.com/SWS. That'll take you to the page. You can sign up for that. If you're listening on iTunes, do that. Or I'll also chuck that link up on the website at geniusesofcopywriting.com, so that you can go and click there and go through the course. So yeah, thank you, John. I have to say this was an extremely valuable call. I've got a page full of notes here myself. which doesn't always happen, but I got a lot out of this, and I think that our listeners will too. So thank you very much for coming along.
Brian, it was a pleasure. Thanks for asking me.
Appreciate it. I'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Geniuses of Copywriting with Brian Casangina. To get the full transcript and all the resources mentioned on today's show, go to www.geniusesofcopywriting.com now.